All right, we'll make a start. If anybody else links in, then they can just pick up from where we are. So good morning, everybody. I am Trina Cooper. I'm the General Manager for Barber. Just like to thank you for making the time today to be part of our second Zoom pop-up chat that we're showcasing with Barber. The session is going to be recorded and it'll be made available on YouTube later on, and we'll send the link out so you can then share that with other colleagues perhaps that haven't been able to join in this morning. Just to be aware that your video image may be seen when we share the presentation on our website and our social media, so just ensure if you don't want to be seen to remain incognito, please have your camera turned off. We'll do our best just to sort of, I think it comes up in an alphabetical order on my screen, so just those 5 people that are there may just be seen. We have a large number of people attending, so we ask you to remain muted, and if you wish to ask a question, down the bottom of your screen you'll see a little chat function, and I will go through and read those questions out to Carrie once she's finished her presentation. And then we can have time for a discussion. We may ask you to unmute yourself to be able to verbalise your question or add more content to it. So today we have Dr. Carrie Barber, who is a psychology lecturer at the University of Waikato, and she's also a Barber board member today. She'll be talking about the Positively Pregnant app. And next week we have booked in Claire Barnett, who is a midwife, a midwifery lecturer, a counsellor and a nurse, to talk about self-care and resilience, and that'll be next Wednesday, the 6th of May at an earlier time of 9:30 in the morning, and that's part of our World Maternal Mental Health forum that we'll be doing that day. We'll be having little bits popping up during the day. So I'm going to hand over to Carrie and I'll let you talk about the app. Thanks, Carrie.
Right. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Trina. Kia ora koutou. I'm glad to be able to be here and talk just a little bit about this tool that we've developed to try to help women to sort of manage stress and cope and basically enhance resilience during pregnancy. You know, just a little bit of background. I'm sure you're all aware, pregnancy by itself is a stressor. That doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, but there's a lot of changes taking place. So that there are all kinds of both social, physical, all variety of changes. So that's a stress. Right now, we're all experiencing the stress of the pandemic, which entails a whole lot of uncertainty and anxiety and a sense that there's danger, and maybe particularly for pregnant women, that this sense of danger, which, you know, it may be a small risk, but for many people that will be very distressing. And then a lot of changes to the way we do things. So all of those things together is kind of a recipe for distress. As I said, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. Stress is just a matter of changes to our the way we're going about things. But distress is when stress becomes a problem. And there's a lot of things we can do about it. So that's actually what I wanted to just talk briefly about today, is this one particular tool that many other people have worked with me over the last 5 years. So many people may have heard of me talk about this at various times, but we've developed an app for women to basically address the psychological, emotional, social sort of aspects of pregnancy. And in order to try to facilitate, and it's not, it's a preventative, you could think of it as a preventative intervention or something that could be useful to women at a variety of sort of levels of stress and coping. And there's 4 different sort of components to the app. There are self-reflection kinds of tools where they sort of are looking at, and you'll see what I'm going to do is give you a brief little tour of all those different components. But in the broad picture, there's ones that are about sort of looking at yourself and thinking about your own strengths and resources and what's going on. There's information about the social and emotional side of pregnancy. There are what we call conversations, which are sort of prompts for and a structure for having either conversations with a partner or support person, or even reflecting with yourself about some of those changes coming up. And then there are some tools for self-care, and we'll talk about each of those things. So there's 4 different kinds of things that are contained in the app. It was developed here over the last 5 years or so. So it's got links to New Zealand sort of terms and resources and ways of going about things. And it is available now, free on Google Play and app stores. As we'll talk about later, we're in the process of upgrading, revising, giving it a new look, but there is a version of it that's available now to anyone who wants, and you're welcome to download it, take a look, and I'd really like your feedback as providers. So let's just do a quick tour of what those components are made up of. The home screen on the app contains sort of, you can look and see where you can go to those 4 different components, and then we'll talk about these later as they complete some of these activities and components. They'll get some personalized feedback and ideas and a plan. In response to, we did pilot the app and with 88 New Zealand women and a lot of and made some changes in response to that. One of the biggest suggestions or comments was that women still wanted something about the physical development of the baby. So, because we had focused this app completely, really initially on the social and emotional side of parenting, because there was a whole lot of other apps and tools providing information about physical development in pregnancy, but they wanted a little bit about the baby. So we've added this bit, which is key to their gestation, about the baby's development. But largely the rest of the app is about psychological and sort of emotional sides. Each day they'll get a tip of the day, which alternates between being sort of a practical tip about something about eating or whatever, or a quote or some kind of something thinking about pregnancy and parenting, which is key to the trimester that they're in. They also have a prompt to, it's quite a complicated app, as you'll see. There's lots of different components. So if they want, they can choose to look at the suggestion for what they might look at today to sort of guide them through the different components of the app. So those are sort of notifications or references that they will get and can take a look at. So then we'll move on to Know Yourself, which is the first of those broad sections of the app. And there are 7 aspects to Know Yourself, which are each kind of self-quizzes or ways where they'll answer questions and then get some kind of feedback about that aspect. The first of which, they don't have to do these in order, but the first on the list is strengths. And that's where they're asked to basically rate themselves about in a whole variety of different kind of areas of their both descriptions of themselves and also of their sort of resources, what they've got available to them socially and financially and physically and all those sorts of things. So it's really taking stock of their strengths and resources. And it's also entailed in this is values. If you think about if one of your strengths is generosity, that's also a value. So the sort of strengths and values. And what that links into as a feedback aspect is something called strength reminders, where they can be asked to, where they can be prompted to act on their strengths. So they can get at one of these messages, which essentially is keyed to the things that they have rated most highly about themselves, and is a cue to both reflect on and act on their strengths. And that comes out of some research in positive psychology. It says if we do act on our strengths and values, we feel better about ourselves and can help you move in a positive direction. So that's Know Your Strengths. Know Your Strategies is in some ways one of the core parts of the app, I would say. Well, that's where they're asked to consider, there are 23 different kind of activities that people might do that might be helpful for them to manage stress or maintain their well-being. And they can also fill in some of their own if they like. So they're asked to look at each of these and read the brief description and think, have I ever tried this? And if they have, was it helpful? Was it not helpful? If they haven't tried that, would they be interested in trying that? So what that does is then sort those activities into the toolkit, which we'll see in a little bit, the things that they're most likely to find useful, and the things, and then, things don't ask me to try that, never mind. And they can access that from the front page. Know Your Stressors looks at a variety of life stressors, some of them related to just general life, like moving and changes in one life. Some of them are specific to pregnancy. They're asked which of these they've experienced. And if they have experienced them, how stressful they've been for them, their sense of control over them and that. So they answer a few questions about them. And they get feedback, both about sort of how their number and level of distress compares to typical. We have some data on typical New Zealand, on typical New Zealand women, and then also some specific feedback on those stressors. So for example, like if they, links to resources, if they'd said they were having financial problems, then they get a link to the Sorted website. Or if they said that they were having, had been threatened or had some kind of domestic violence kind of relationship, then they get links to women's resource centers, that sort of thing. Know Your Emotions is basically a mood rating tool where they can pick which feelings they'd like to rate, some of which are positive, some of which are negative, so they can decide which, and they can write in their own. And then they can ask to be reminded to rate that daily or however often they want. And those are charted here. And then also if they rate their mood low over a period of time, more than 3 days, then they'll get a message prompting them to seek help. And if they continue to rate it low, reminding them to talk to somebody about that, talk to your partner, talk to your GP, those sorts of things. Know Your Village is looking at social support. So it's asking them questions about who the different people in their lives who can support them in particular ways. Who do you go to for advice, to just have a good time? Who can help you with practical things? Who can you help you with the baby? Those sorts of things. So that then they get a sort of graphic feedback of the people who are there in their life that they might consult. And then Know Your Style is about, it's about cognitive or psychological style. It's about, and asks them some questions about sort of how they view the world. It's what the psychologists would call locus of control is part of it, how they understand how the world works. And how much they want to have control, because people will vary in terms of how much they want to have control, how they make decisions when they have to make choices about things. And for this one, they can fill it out. And then if they have a partner, they can ask their partner to fill it out. And then they get feedback both about their own kind of style and how it might apply to the decisions and the things that they're having to think about in pregnancy, and how the two of them together might interact around their particular styles. And then finally, Know Your Health asks questions about both health behaviors and health care. Have they got a midwife yet? What do they feel they can talk to the midwife about various topics and those sorts of things? And that also is key to feedback about those particular areas. They can get feedback, and then they can decide if they want to set goals in particular areas where they've gotten feedback, like they might want to set goal about their diet or exercise or something like that. And there's a goal setting tool which is coming up here. Conversations is a set of, as I said, kind of prompts for thinking about and talking about some of the big issues that come up during pregnancy and early parenting. And the first one, and so here's the list of the conversations topics. The first one, who does what, is the most structured of them and the most, in some ways, well, computer interactive, because this is the one where actually both the pregnant woman and her partner can fill out these questions about who does what, essentially. Well, who does what now? You know, who prepares the food, who does all these chores, who's going to do what after the baby's born, and then the partner fills it out, and then the feedback they get is how well they agreed on these things, and that's what they can have the conversation about. Okay, yes, well, look, in this area, we actually, I think I'm doing it all, and you think you're doing it all, so, you know, they can discuss those. So, so that's a sort of practical discussion about chores, which is an area that many people have some challenges in during this time. The other conversations are more open-ended in the sense that they just raise questions for people to talk and think about in these various areas. The one, Birth Hopes and Plans, has a variety of questions that might help them to prepare for talking with the midwife about a birth plan, or it might be done with the midwife, although the time that may or may not be practical. But it's really made as a tool for the woman and her partner or support person to think through some of these things so that they can then make some decisions and plans. So birth hopes and plans, one about weaving traditions, is about thinking about what are the traditions that come from your family or both families, or what do you want to carry forward in your family. Money Talks is about financial decisions and changes, and that was one of the most popular, well-used ones in the pilot. Daydreams, Values, and Priorities are more general about sort of how do you imagine your child in the future? What kinds of things do you think are important? So talking through some of those things. Moving on to do something, the activities that are in the app. That includes, there's a set of 6 audio recorded kind of guided activities that are things like body awareness, which we would call body scan typically in a lot of mindfulness, but that's confusing in this context because of the scan word in pregnancy. So it's really, but it's a body scan kind of thing. Teaching couple of different methods of relaxation, breathing, stretching, guided imagery, some of those things they can choose to use if they want to. There are 3 kind of journaling type activities. One, Notes to Self, which is a kind of CBT-based activity, cognitive behavior therapy, which talks about sort of they're thinking, what are you saying to yourself and what would you rather say to yourself, so that they can send those prompts to themselves of what they'd rather be saying. Notes to Baby is a journal of baby where they can write things that are happening. They can take a picture if they like and attach it in there. Just keep track of that. And there's a gratitude journal where they can be prompted and reminded if they'd like daily to write something that they're grateful for, and then sort of build their list of things that they can be appreciative of. Health goals and plans, I mentioned when they do the health assessment, they can then flag, if there's areas that they then want to flag to set some goals for, they can go into the health goals and plans and set particular goals. And there's links to information that come from the feedback, and then talk about how, make plans for how they can accomplish those and track their progress. And finally, there's some things that are just for fun. There's a link to funny videos in YouTube. It's by default funny baby videos, but they can set that to something else if they want to, just to make the point that sometimes you just need to take a break. And there's a little game in there, which is a match 3 type game with a slightly reproductive theme, which can be a little addictive. Finally, I think, yes, there are the find out components, which are really 30 brief and structured as kind of like frequently asked questions, where it folds out on a variety of topics. But they're basically little bits of information about a variety of topics having to do with becoming a parent. And they all include some kinds of links to further information, either if it's more information about a topic, some of those are international sources, some of them are local sources. If they're about resources and stuff, they're trying to be local here to New Zealand. But they go through things like, changes in relationships. If stress becomes distress is the one that has the most information about managing depression, anxiety, seeking help for that. What if you have a prior history of trauma or abuse or pregnancy loss or those kinds of things. And finally, back home, so if you've gone through and done, especially doing those Know Yourself interactive resources, then that will fill up these ideas and feedback boxes. The ideas box has the toolkit, which I mentioned when we talked about Know Your Strategies, so they can look and see these are the things that are most helpful to me, that I think are most helpful to me to manage stress. So they can look at this and they can actually change this if they like. If they decide, no, I tried that, and no, I did not like that meditation thing, they can move it back down to this, definitely not, whoops. Or if sometimes, a list of all these things is a little bit too much, can be overwhelming. If they just want some suggestions, they just want 3 suggestions of things to do right now, they can hit the suggestions from toolkit button and it will pick 3. It picks primarily from the tried and true box, but also picks 1 from one of these boxes of new things to try, of things that they might try right now to manage that stress. Strength reminders is also in there, and good things, which is the gratitude log activity, and their notes to self, the positive things that they've written in there to say to themselves are shown there. So the basic principles that underlie the app, some of them include, part of it is recognizing what is sort of taking stock and assessing what your own situation is. That includes the strengths, but also the stressors and the things that are going on, and the amazing changes that are going on during pregnancy, sort of getting information about that, but thinking about one's own situation. It's trying to identify, so you identify the stressors, but use the strengths to build resilience, to control the things that you can control, consider what are your options and make those choices, and develop a personalized plan. Nobody's going to want to do all those activities, but hopefully everybody can find something in there that's useful, and that can help them to develop a plan for managing stress and acting on their own values and priorities to sort of to develop their family going in the direction that they want to go. We are currently in the process of redesigning, of using it. So this, I mean, the original app was really built by on a shoestring by a not small, you'll see a large group of people contributed, but we didn't have a big programming team or anything like that. We now have some funding to get some design help, so it's going to have a new look. We're also, so any input is welcome, both on look and or on content, largely on thinking about how people have been using them. So we're in the process of that right now. We hope also to develop a version for the partner. The partner is included in some of this now, but there isn't a separate partner app, and that might be something that we want to remember. Partners have their own experience of this whole process. We would like to do a postnatal expansion. You know that there's a lot of the tools and ideas in here which are very applicable postnatally, but the information is directed specifically at during the pregnancy. So if we develop an expansion for postnatal notes. And I'd really like to develop a version that can be linked so that someone like a midwife, counselor, therapist, or teacher in the teen pregnancy units could be linked to and communicate with the woman who's going through this using the app in a sort of mentoring kind of version. So that's another thing we're working on. So there's more information if you're interested on the Positively Pregnant website, and you can also see the links to get the app and that sort of thing there. And here's where you can see most of the people who contributed to the development of the original app. There's more people now on board. As I mentioned, we did a pilot study, and we had 88 women try and use the app and give feedback and contributed to the development of the version that's out there now. I guess that's the brief whirlwind tour. If anybody has any questions, I'd be really happy to both hear from you and answer questions that you have.
Right, now there's no questions as such. Christina Patterson says, looks fantastic. Joe Chambers says, looks awesome.
Thank you.
If anyone's got any questions, feel free to type those in there. Carrie, you were looking at using it to create a mentor tool to go along with it. Mm-hmm. How is it sort of being used at the moment? Would a midwife or a LMC sit with the mum and say, hey, have you been using the app? Or, I know you've been using the app. Let's have a look through it. Are they sort of sitting that way?
They could do that. I don't know. It's a good question how people are using it out there in clinical practice from the professional perspective. Right now, there isn't an easy way to do that except to sit next to the person, which is fine, except right now in this kind of circumstance, it would be really nice to have that kind of link to where they could send. And some other of these tools that are being developed now, which they call e-mental health tools, they have that kind of sharing choice. And that is, it's technically more challenging. We thought about that in this version of it, but there are a lot of also sort of privacy concerns, and figuring out how to do that was more of a challenge than we had the programming resources for at that point. But we're hopeful that we can in the future, because I think that having that kind of interaction where you can do the stressor, for example, the know your stressors thing, and then share it with someone and say, here was my feedback, or here was my feedback on the health assessment. I want to work on this. How could we go about doing that? So just to facilitate a conversation, really.
Great, thank you. A question from Christina Patterson. She says, thank you for finding a way to make this free of charge. Just wondering what suggestions are made for getting more help if they are feeling distressed.
Well, you're welcome to look. I mean, there's descriptions of the different sorts of mental health and helping professionals who might be available. There are links to sources, and there's, so there's descriptions of the process. They're encouraged to consult their GP because that's the most broadly available kind of resource, and to talk to their midwife about it, because these women during pregnancy hopefully will have a midwife. Probably the ones who are using the app are using resources, so hopefully they have a midwife. So it's basically information and encouragement, and links to resources.
Great. A question from Tina Berryman Camp. Do you know how many people have used this app and their demographics? And have you had feedback on it? Have people been finding it useful, given suggestions for change? And how are you evaluating the outcomes?
Good question. Well, during the pilot, we have all that information and specific information because we're getting information from the women who tried it at that point. But since then I haven't looked recently to see we know only about how many downloads we have. And I haven't gotten, we've asked for feedback. There are ways that they can give feedback. We haven't been getting a lot of feedback. So yeah, the truth is I don't really know in the last year or so since it's been out there. We haven't gotten a lot of specific feedback. We got a lot of feedback during the process of the pilot, which is what helped to shape the development of this current version of the app. But that's why we'd really like more feedback now at this point, because we are taking another look at, how we can improve the usability and basically how it works for women. In terms of demographics, I don't know, and that we sort of offer them the chance to contribute, to sign up, to share their data, but we're not getting a lot of uptake on that. It may be concerns about privacy or the process or whatever. So, and we're not. I'm just hesitant to make them do that or to do too much spying on them. Because there's a lot of quite personal, sensitive information they're putting into this particular app, and we want to be clear that we're not scooping that up.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. Tina, is that enough answer? Yep, great. From Tonya, I think anything online these days is such a bonus. I'll definitely be forwarding this to all my midwife friends I know, and I think GPs should know about it also. Yeah. Do they?
Well, we've been trying to tell. I was supposed to present at the conference. All the conferences are getting canceled right now. I found it harder to figure out how, I suppose, to get into the networks of GPs than midwives, really. That I maybe put more effort, but I certainly have talked at the GP CME meeting in Rotorua. I've been talking at every opportunity that I can find about it. But if anyone has any suggestions as to how to get the word out to any of a variety of groups, I would really welcome them. Because yeah, I agree, GPs are midwives and GPs and antenatal educators are kind of the three main groups that we've been trying to communicate with.
Great. Question from Christina. I have a group of pregnant women and their partners going into a Preparing for Parenthood program this coming week, and I'll suggest this app and seek their feedback. Great. How best to get their feedback to you, and when do you expect the new version to be available?
There's a place where they can send feedback on the Positively Pregnant website. And then I think there's also a place on the app. Let me just make sure that that's true while I'm talking about this. When the new one is going to be available, I don't know, because these things are so. I would say I would guess it's going to be at least 6 months would be my guess. I mean, we're at the point of working with them on the design, the graphic design essentially, and the user design. They haven't really started the programming. and everything seems to always take longer than you think it's going to. So I don't know, I'd be happy if it was in 6 months, but I think we'll have to see. Yeah, there's a submit feedback on the app itself. If you go into the little, you know, lines at the top where you set up and stuff like that, there's a place where you can submit feedback, and it'll go it'll get to me. It's find its way electronically to me.
Great, excellent. Now, have we got any further questions? Anything else for Carrie? We've just got a couple more minutes before we wrap up. Jo Chambers, she says, I'll share the app on the Doula New Zealand page, and with some soon-to-be mums that she's meeting next week as well.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, that's awesome. We really appreciate everyone getting into there. Sue Wong says, thanks so much for sharing this. I'll definitely pass it on to my friend who's a community midwife at the Hutt Hospital. And Jenny Sato will let the Plunkett Pregnancy and Parenting Education team know.
Oh,
and,
wonderful.
We've got the email address there if we want to follow up. And Yvonne, she'll share it with her midwifery students.
Oh, great. Yes, I talk to the WinTech ones, but I don't get around the country to talk to others.
Unfortunately, Karen says that she'll be sharing this on the Facebook page, the Pregnancy Centre. Hilary will remind everyone at Parent Centre. Andrea will share this with breastfeeding peer supporters. Lisa Gare down in Invercargill. Hey, Lisa. She'll let the Southern people know. And
yay, this is really good.
Yeah.
See, the online world is, yeah, bonus.
That's excellent. Jennifer will share it with Early Start colleagues.
Great. Oh, well, I really appreciate you all being here and that enthusiasm to share it, because and we really just want to get it out there for people to try and to give us feedback. And to, I mean, hopefully there are things in there that will provide support and information for all different sorts of situations and women.
Great, excellent. Well, that looks like the end of the questions, so we'll wrap up. Thank you all again for being available for our part of Pop-Up Chats, and we look forward to seeing you next week, which is going to be on Wednesday, the 6th of May at 9:30 in the morning with Claire Barnett, talking about self-care and resilience. It is actually Perinatal Awareness Week next week, starts this Sunday, the 2nd of May through till the 9th of May, and Wednesday is the World Maternal Mental Health Day, which is recognised internationally, and there is a petition link as well, which I will forward everybody. Some of you may have seen it already, where we're wanting that day to be acknowledged with the World Health Organization. So all over the world, there will be events happening. It's always the first Wednesday of May. We were going to be doing a one-day seminar in Porirua, but unfortunately due to COVID, that has been postponed to later in the year. So we'll be doing the pop-up chat with Claire Barnett, and I'm trying to organise a couple of other things. Keep an eye on our Facebook page for the week as well. Mel's always great at putting up just little snippets, both for healthcare providers and parents, because we've got quite a diverse audience on our Facebook page as well. So we just really appreciate the support that you guys give us over this time as well. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, please send us an email, office@parda.nz. Otherwise, we'll just keep chugging away in the background, doing what we think is right and what we think people need out there, and whatever support we can give you guys as well with the work that you're doing to help the new mums and dads out there going through their stressful time as well. So thank you all. We will sign off now. This recording will be made available later on today for you to share again. And thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll say see you later.
Bye.